All right, it's not seeming to work. Three, two, clicking the button, it didn't work. Okay, three, two, one. Hello again. Welcome back to another episode of Accept, Then Achieve. I'm delighted to have our guest today, Stephanie, with us. Stephanie, hello.
Hi.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Stephanie Tsai Karlik, and I'm currently located in Tainan, Taiwan.
Awesome. So I'd love to have the listeners get to know you more. Are you able to describe like why you were inspired to speak on this podcast? What does acceptance and achievement mean to you?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm inspired to speak on this podcast because of my relationship with you and how we met, which was at the Asian Wonder Women Conference in Taipei, Taiwan, which was a really awesome conference because it was bringing together all Asian women who had mutual interests in traveling and doing business and personal growth and development, spiritual growth, and things like that. So it was really awesome to meet like-minded women who were similarly global and part of the Asian diaspora. And it just felt really serendipitous to all meet. And so I'm really glad that I went because I got to meet somebody like you.
Same, same. And yeah, and so many other people. We met again at like sort of the part two in Las Vegas randomly for another business conference. And Stephanie and I are continuing on that energy by hosting a gathering for women for storytelling, but also probably likely for women of the Asian diaspora to get more in touch with your roots as well, which we'll talk more at the end of this episode on. So, Stephanie, could you share just more about your personal growth journey and your relationships to acceptance and achievements?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've kind of been delving into that recently and thinking about my life achievements. And I think that when it comes to looking at our achievements, it's important to not be too attached to them, but also sometimes to take a step back and appreciate them as well. So I think that achievements early on in my life were more important to me. Probably like a lot of people when you're younger, it's kind of like an anchor to hold on to. And for me, it was a way of setting up my life. So I grew up, I'm half Taiwanese, half American. I grew up in the 80s in Nebraska, in the middle of the US. And from an early age, I think I felt a little bit of a sense of displacement. Like I couldn't quite understand why I was living in Nebraska in the United States. And I definitely felt a pull more towards my Asian side and my Taiwanese heritage. And that was an interesting pull to feel because there weren't a lot of Asian people around me. There wasn't really a community. It's not like there was a Chinatown or anything like that, but there was a Japanese goods store run by a Japanese immigrant man named Aki that we were very close to. And then there was a short-lived Chinese language school run by some Taiwanese immigrant friends of ours. And so I took Chinese language classes when I was a kid, and I really loved them.
Mm.
And so these were kind of touch points to my Asian roots, as well as some really kitsch movies like Bloodsport and Big Trouble in Little China,
Mm.
and these cult classic kind of goofy representations of Chinese American culture or Chinese culture that me and my cousins really liked. And so, yeah, I really wanted to explore the world. Like that was something that I gathered at a young age. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see lots of different countries. I loved books. And so from a young age, I gathered that studying was kind of like my ticket to the world, and that getting good grades opened up a lot of doors and possibilities for me. So I was very self-motivated and got straight A's and like basically graduated valedictorian from my high school, which led to me being able to go to California, which is like what I wanted was to like leave my home environment, go somewhere different, explore, expand my horizons. And I think that in college it started to take a toll on me being so perfection oriented because I put that same type of academic pressure on myself when I was in college. I actually not only did I graduate valedictorian of high school, I also did from college, which is absurd to me when I think about it because that's really difficult to do and I managed to do it, but it was an insane amount of anxiety and pressure that I put on myself to kind of succeed. I felt like if I do this, it will open up more doors for me.
Mm.
You know, I didn't come from a family that was particularly connected in the industry that I wanted to work in. And I just knew that I was going to have to be the architect of my own future and that was going to have to play out in an academic way. And I think that as Asian Americans, for many of us, being academically excellent is the way that we open doors for ourselves. It's like the
Mhm.
most accessible, most understandable, and maybe most visible way that people like advance their lives and get stability. And so that was kind of what I did. And um, I had to take time to, in my 20s and 30s, recalibrate because it would take a toll on my health, both physically and mentally. And so learn how to balance my life better, I would say. And then only recently, now in my 40s, can I kind of look back at those and other accomplishments and feel a sense of pride again around them because I did step away and kind of say, like, oh, how silly that was, and kind of put my energy towards these other things that are not traditional success markers. And I think because of that, I can look back and go, oh, that's actually pretty cool that you did all that, you know? Like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. That's pretty hard, and you did a good job.
Mm. So what has your
Yeah.
career path been like? Are you like me with so many different turning points, or what were the big
I
turning points
think
for you?
so. Yeah. Like, so career-wise, I studied international relations and Spanish. I was very into politics and culture and language
Mm.
and writing. And so I definitely see the study of culture, writing, and language as like a through line through everything that I did. Worked in politics, worked in diplomacy, worked for the Taiwanese government, did grad school in Japan. And then when I came back from Japan, I was in my late 20s and I just didn't want to be in a career that would have me traveling a ton.
Hmm.
And a lot of careers in international relations have you traveling a lot as you get older in age as a woman. And that's just not something that I wanted. I wanted to be anchored.
Mm.
And so I began to explore writing more because that was what I was consistently doing in all of my previous work positions was the function of writing for people or writing for me or translating, using the written word to communicate a message. And
Hmm.
so that's when I started writing my own book. I kind of was like, I'm tired of writing for all of these male diplomats, like using their voice, thinking how they would think. And I want to publish something in my voice.
Hmm.
And that's when I made a shift towards doing more of my own creative writing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell us about that book?
Yeah, so I had done. a 2-month research project in Shanghai when I was in grad school, and it was about returned Chinese Americans to China, people whose it could be their parents or possibly their parents' parents who left China to go to America to explore opportunities. And then they decided to move back to China themselves to
Mm.
explore professional opportunities or economic opportunities because at that time the situation in the West was not doing so well. The economy wasn't great. And so you would see a lot of returned Chinese Americans looking to get in on the action as China's economy was like rapidly developing. And so I wanted to research these individuals and find out what they were doing in Shanghai. So it was a pretty straightforward research process. But while I was living in Shanghai, I was having kind of a crazy personal life because I was swept up into the energy of the city, which at that time was very electric, very frenetic.
Mm.
And after I turned in what became my master's thesis, I was like, I want to do a creative version of what I just wrote,
Mm.
where I actually include people's sexual escapades, real dialogues that were happening,
Mm.
um, real depictions of street scenes and just bring life to this story in not such a dry academic way. And so then I
Mm.
wrote this book over the course of 7 years and then published it, self-published it because it was a way for me to have creative control over it. And then also because there's not a huge amount, especially at that time, I don't think there were a huge amount of Asian stories being published. And like,
Mm.
so I was like, fuck it, I'll just self-publish it then because I really believe in platforming Asian
Mhm.
female voices. I uh interestingly kind of played on the idea of Blade Runner and cyberpunk when writing that book. And that's obviously a very white male gaze upon China and upon Asian people and upon cosmopolitanism, a very global, exciting Chinese city. And I was like, I want to tell this story from the perspective of an Asian female.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing. So
So
it was mostly nonfiction based on the real stories that
it
you
was
hired?
creative nonfiction. And
Mm.
so it gave me like space because it didn't have to be me. It could be representative of me and some of the experiences or most of the experiences that I was having, but there could also be embellishments here
Mhm.
and there, or I could have fun. I could play with the
Mm.
story as well and not have to feel like this is a representation of myself and this is a memoir. It just
Right.
gave me free reign to be like no holds barred in telling a lot of this stuff that I either experienced or witnessed.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. I've added it to my list. I'll have to read it. Maybe when we're together in Taiwan. Um, yeah, wow. So your journey has really been so much, it sounds like that common theme, but a lot of experimentation too, of different places, different jobs, different.
Yeah, I think it's been a lot of experimentation because I'm the kind of person who I don't like getting stagnant somewhere. And if I feel like
Mhm.
my personal or spiritual or professional growth is like being impeded in any way, I'm gonna move on.
Mhm. Mhm.
Gonna move on and find greener pastures and find a place for me to grow. I just am a person who wants to grow and experience new and different things. And I
Mhm.
think that particularly in America, people like to put Asian women in boxes, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of obstacles to growth. And for me, leaving America and coming to Asia
Mhm.
took away a lot of those barriers that I was experiencing as an Asian American and allowed me to flourish.
Mm, amazing. Yeah. How did you decide on your current place in Tainan as your home?
Well, I have family here. So on my mom's side, I have some uncles here. And when I had gone back to California after that period in Japan, I was in California for about 10 years. And I had this deep, deep longing the entire time I was in California to
Mhm.
live in Asia again. And the only reason I didn't is because I really missed my family and I wanted to be closer to my family. And yeah, I just started to kind of build a life there. And slowly, it just seemed like, maybe I'll never really get back there because I was getting more and more entrenched in my life in California. But then there was almost, I want to say, a string of events that seemed very unfortunate at the time that now don't seem so unfortunate, where I got very, very ill during the pandemic with COVID, and I had just moved for a new job, and you know, basically everything came collapsing down in my life in such a way that I had to rebuild from scratch no matter what. And once I regained my mobility after being essentially in a bed for a couple of years, I was like, I am going to rebuild in Asia, and that's that. It's now or never. This is my opportunity. Since everything got burned to the ground in my life, I
Mm,
may as well move back to where I really want to be, which was
yeah,
Taiwan. Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that reminder of how fragile our lives are too, just
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
for
and by
sure.
not knowing how much time we have, don't we want to actually do what our heart really desires to do?
Yeah, I think in some way, the pandemic, whether people got affected to that extent or not, it put in perspective for a lot of people what their priorities should be if their priorities were not what they actually wanted them to be. Some people, I feel like, were kind of living life as they thought that they should, and then that happened, and many people kind of reprioritized and said, I'm gonna live based upon what my true values are because life is short and
Mhm.
there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of redo things here.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the pandemic made many people even just pause and question for the first time because so many of us were conditioned, programmed on autopilot, live life this way, and we don't dig deeper to figure out, wait, is this really fit me or is there something else? Some part of me
Yeah,
not acknowledging or yeah, integrating to it.
right,
Um,
right.
how was and how if you may ask, because some, if I may ask, so some people we've had some difficulties with our families. Did you have difficulties with like just navigating the relationships, especially with all your turning points and pivots?
I think that I've been pretty fortunate with that in that I left home when I was really young. I was 17, and I have a pretty cool Taiwanese mom. Like, I
Mm.
don't my mom as a tiger mom, maybe by American standards, but definitely not by Taiwanese standards. My mom's
Mm.
like a very chill mom by Taiwanese standards. And my dad was a hippie, in the 60s and followed a guru from India to LA. And so
Wow.
very easygoing in his own way, too. So my parents really didn't have a lot of say. Sometimes it felt almost like I was lacking guidance. My mom was an artist, too. She was a musician. So it almost felt like in a way I was lacking guidance about what to do in the future. Like there was no input. It was just like whatever you want to do. And so sometimes I was like, I mean, what should I do? But it gave me a lot of freedom to explore and then create my own path. And
Mm.
I feel very fortunate that they really just want me to be happy.
Mhm.
And so, that's That's pretty awesome. I didn't have a huge amount of complications around family
Mm,
in that way. I do think sometimes I'm misunderstood by them because, um, you know, there's when you, I guess, start living in all of these other countries and speaking lots of languages, there's so many other parts of you. You
mhm,
become a very multifaceted person. And I think that's easier to convey to my mom, who is also a very multifaceted and multicultural person, just being Taiwanese. Automatically, you're exposed to like Taiwanese, Chinese, and Japanese culture. And then she's been very Americanized too. So she understands like switching languages, code switching, having kind of a different personality in different languages and things like that. So
mhm.
I've really enjoyed recently, she and I being able to reconnect in so many different languages and be kind of goofy and wacky.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's so true. The different languages, there's certain words that only exist in certain languages. So it really, yeah, just does affect a little bit like who you are, like just a different side of you and being in a different culture as well. I recently read an article from a AirAsia flight magazine, flight magazine that a lot of people are more and more digital nomads are being birthed. And because not that they want to explore different countries, but they want to explore the different versions of themselves that it brings out.
Uh,
And I thought it
yeah,
was so beautiful.
I know. I think that too. I would say now though, I'm actually having what I would say is like more struggle with family than I've had before because I'm now the Taiwanese American that returned to Taiwan and I'm interacting with
Mm,
family members I grew up with. And frankly, they're a lot more collectivist than I am as a Taiwanese American and just as a person who enjoys her solitude.
mhm,
And so I'm still kind of feeling out how do I engage with a very collectivist culture while also having been raised with these very individualistic American values and
mhm.
also being a writer and a person who enjoys a huge amount of solitude for the most part. And so it's been tricky navigating those relationships here, and I'm still trying to figure out what the right balance is for me.
Yeah, I think that's really tricky. Like because it could be so hard. At least like for me and many other people, if we're recovering people pleasing, then you just are have porous boundaries or very loose boundaries, and then you just may not realize, oh no, I overgave or I overstepped and I crossed my own. And then how do I recover? How do I, if that pattern's already been set, how do I slowly shift that too with other people? It's
Yeah, yeah. Like recently, also thinking about even just the idea of narcissism as we see it, like in a pathologized sense in the West. And there are certain traits that exist, I think, within Chinese and Taiwanese culture that would definitely, from a Western lens, be characterized as narcissism, but it's a cultural trait. And so
mm-hmm.
just what is toxic, right? Because
Right.
like what's toxic here is very different to what's toxic there, or what people consider to be toxic as well.
Yeah.
My view of toxic could be very different from a family member's view of what's toxic, right? So that's also a really interesting question as well.
True. Yeah. Where is the line? Can you give an example of a trait, such a trait?
I think that, yeah, like I said, my solitude, I consider my solitude solitude, but I think maybe to my family, it could be interpreted as isolationism.
Mm-hmm.
And like, she's not participating with us. Is it a rejection of us? And it's actually not. It's, I love my family so much, and it's for the preservation of our relationships that I want to have healthy boundaries and not be codependent with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a totally different threshold of uh, codependency or judgments on what's codependent here as opposed to the West. And so I'm still kind of learning about that too, because there are things that look codependent to me
Mhm.
in terms of like how people live together here, you know, when kids are very old and they're still very protected by their parents,
Mhm.
when we would be expected to be independent and on our own and learning our own lessons and out in the world in the West already. So it looks very codependent from my perspective, but maybe not from theirs. Maybe it's just more interdependent to them. So I think
Mhm.
that there's perspectives towards that.
Yeah, yeah. And it
Yeah.
almost is like even what's common or normalized in the country, and you see other people doing, you're like, oh, if other people are doing it, it's fine to do this, right? And
Yeah. And I think also the way that people banter with each other as well, because when you're in those really intimate relationships where you're living multi-generationally as well,
mm,
you start to, you know, kind of bicker with your family, right? Like I always make a joke that I don't want to live with my family for more than like 5 days or a week at a time, because no matter how much you love people, you can kind of start rubbing each other the wrong way or bickering or, you know, old dynamics come up or something like that. But here, a lot of this kind of bickering and henpecking, I would call
and
it, because,
pecking.
yeah, you know, like I'll be at the gym and there will be ladies there that kind of give me their opinion about me without me having asked for it. And
Mm,
that's culturally normal there. And um, I don't know. Like sometimes I can tell it's coming from a good place, and then sometimes it just feels rather unhealthy and like, well, I didn't really ask what you think about like my appearance or this or that. And so sometimes it's a little unwelcome, but it's just a totally different cultural standard.
hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing. Yeah. And what are I guess I was wondering what is like a narcissistic trait that is just culturally normal there?
I think that because people here have a lot of trauma
Hmm.
and relates to the war history and colonization and instability. So I know that many people have scarcity mindsets. Like it doesn't matter how much wealth they accumulate, they're
Hmm.
always thinking kind of transactionally, and the way that they interact with people is very transactional. And there's a lot of fear, almost excessive fear around other people cheating them
Mm.
and, you know, cheating them out of money or taking advantage of them or lying to them. And I think that, yeah, again, it relates to growing up with so much uncertainty and like a landscape of war and poverty. So the behaviors that manifest, I think, in the West would definitely be called narcissistic, but
Hmm.
here is very common to
Yeah,
see.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like looking out, excessively looking out for yourself.
Yes.
That thing. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, we took a tangent from the questions, but I love being organic. This is great. I don't know how much time we have left, but I always like to ask people like, what's been most helpful for you in your journey of accepting yourself? Like, what were the really tough moments? Was there a rock bottom moment that stood out to you? What helped you climb out of it?
I think when I got that ill, that was a huge turning point for me because I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it through, if I was going to live through that situation, because it was just such a rough period of illness and life-threatening. And at that point, because I was so immobile, I had kind of no choice but to lay in bed and think about what life is about and ask myself a lot of spiritual questions and, you know, think about these so-called achievements, you know, and listen to Ram Dass and people like that who are very accomplished, but also did things like went on pilgrimages to India and came back and started talking about the spiritual path, which is a very nonlinear path.
Mhm.
And you, I think once you consciously decide to take a more spiritual path in life, you kind of get on this um, magic carpet and you stop trying to climb a ladder. And
Mm.
yeah, I feel like I'm on an odyssey now in Taiwan. I joke about it, but it feels very powerful for me to be here and be in touch with my relatives and my maternal ancestors and be able to visit their grave sites and connect with this entire lineage and history that I was quite removed from growing up in America. So it feels very surreal sometimes, but very meaningful. And I think that I really accepted myself, yeah, just around the age of 40 when that huge bout of illness happened. And I was just like, if I'm not gonna fully love myself and accept myself now, then when? And I've done enough. Like, there
Mhm.
has to be, for anybody who's had a life of overachieving, there has to be a point where you're like, okay, enough. Like, I have accomplished enough officially. If I never accomplish anything again in my life, that's fine. Like, and, I was really lucky in that I had my mom around me, especially who is such a lifesaver and told me like, I'm so proud of you for everything that you are, everything you've done in your life, and reinforce this idea that like, if you never do another thing in your life, I'll still be so proud of you. And like, to have even like one person outside of you say that, it kind of can bolster your confidence to just accept yourself as you are.
Mhm.
And I decided also at that point that I was not going to live for external validation, like whether the cheerleaders of life showed up or not. Like,
Mhm.
I internally knew I was enough and I had survived enough and I had put myself through enough and I am enough.
Mhm.
And just breathing, just being here is already so amazing and magical.
Yeah, and like I deserve to exist. I don't need to do anything to
Yeah,
deserve that. Yeah.
exactly. Like, and that I think is something that, especially as Asian women, we don't get enough of. We are constantly, subconsciously, and sometimes consciously being told that
Mhm.
we're not enough in some way or another, whether it's in terms of our domestic lives or our professional lives, academic lives. We're kind of always pushing ourselves and always feeling like not enough.
Mhm.
And I think that, derives kind of this um, minority status in the US, marginalized status. And so I know so many Asian American women, including myself, that for years I felt like I have to. Condoleezza Rice once said, as a Black woman, her father told her that she had to do everything twice as good to compete with white people
Mhm.
and succeed. I think that I very much carried that mindset when I was younger that, like, okay, if I want to get somewhere, because I'm not from this country and like because I'm the child of an immigrant and because I'm Asian American, like I have to be twice as good or three times as good to compete with somebody who's more established here, who's white, who's connected.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of pressure
Mhm.
to live with. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and
And
it's a
so,
distorted view too of this. I mean, we have a
yeah,
distorted system, but to internalize that and feel like that applies to all aspects of life, then yeah, it,
yeah, like what if we just stopped doing that? And what if we recognized like our internal gifts that we have and really carried that self-confidence? Because I had a lot of gifts already internally
mhm,
that I didn't have confidence around. And so it took the cultivation of a kind of consciousness of what my gifts and talents were to understand my worth. But even without those things, that I'm not less than as a
Mhm.
result of social programming, maybe indicating or telling me that I am less than.
Mhm.
So, like breaking some of those, I guess, subliminally communicated racist messages that carry through our society.
Yeah. It takes a lot of conscious unlearning of that. And I
Yeah,
think like really to embrace our uniqueness as like truly like we're 1 in 8 billion and nobody has like our exact set of what we can offer. And so yeah, the system isn't perfect. I think in a perfect system you could just one person wouldn't have to work 3 times as hard to get the same level of, I don't know, recognition or as someone else. But yeah, I think it's the confidence too that can be magnetic. It can really help if we just have that internal, like we know our worth, and yeah, as you said, we detach even from external validation or anything. Like we know just being alive is truly a gift. Like I even see it, like even if people like you and I, like we did a lot in our lives, but even if we didn't from the very beginning, just like us existing, I saw a quote today that was like, I already have a job. Why do I need another? I already have the job of keeping myself alive. And there's so much that people take for granted that it takes to keep yourself alive and functional. So it's, yeah, taking care of ourselves. So anything else we choose to do is just bonus. Like we should celebrate ourselves. We don't do that enough.
yeah, like, and I think that Frida Kahlo said, gringas are always trying to be somebody. That was something that turned her off the most about being in America as a Mexican artist and painter. She's like, everybody's trying to be somebody here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is a very American characteristic, is that like everybody wants to get to that platform where they feel like, okay, I'm influential enough now. Everybody kind of wants to be somebody. And we have this rags to riches narrative that we're taught about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and
Mm-hmm.
on your own individually without community necessarily achieving dreams and achieving the American dream, and becoming a multimillionaire or whatever it is. And there comes a point, and I think that it probably happens in times of like war and plague and poor economy and despair, where it's just like, okay, this is a delusion at this point, and how about being alive is just great already, and you know be nobody, like again mentioning Ramdas said, be nobody. After
Mm-hmm.
you become somebody,
Right.
sure, you want to become somebody, but after that, then what? Then you have to become nobody. And
Mm-hmm.
so that bout of illness was really me becoming nobody, and like in that void being like worthy just because I'm here and doing nothing in this bed but breathing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we only have a couple minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to share? A biggest piece of advice you'd tell the audience or your younger self? Any unique practical tool that was most helpful for you, or just anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? And how can people find you?
Uh, if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be breathe, deep breaths, slow down, be present. Everything that's meant for you is on its